There is a place beneath all the noise, beneath the arguments about which path is true, which tradition is right, which teacher knows the way, beneath the labels we carry and the ones we have been given. There is a place where every genuine seeker in every age, in every culture, speaking every language has eventually arrived. The mystics called it by 1,000 names. We simply call it the Undivided. This channel exists for one kind of person, not the one who has all the answers, the one who still has the questions, the one who is spiritually hungry but doesn't necessarily belong to any one single table, the one who has heard something true in Rumi and in the Buddha and in Lao Tzu and in Eckhart Tolle and suspects, quietly, that they were all pointing at the same thing. If that is you, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Welcome home. Did you feel that? The silence at the beginning. I held it longer than you probably expected, right? Maybe it made you a little uncomfortable. Maybe something in you wanted to skip forward, to get to the content, to get moving. That silence you just experienced, even for those brief seconds, is the doorway we are walking through today. That discomfort, that little restlessness, is exactly what this episode is about. In a world that is never quiet, in a culture that treats stillness as either laziness or luxury, the great wisdom traditions of the world make a radical claim: silence is not empty. It is full of the very presence we spend our lives chasing. Welcome back to our journey with Sophia. Today we explore what may be the most countercultural practice on this entire path, the practice of becoming still. There is a fundamental principle that runs through every wisdom tradition we have explored, and it is this: Sophia cannot be seized. She can only be received. This runs completely counter to how we approach almost everything else in modern life. We are achievers. We set goals. We develop strategies. We optimize. And when we encounter the spiritual life, we often bring this same orientation. How do I acquire wisdom? What are the steps? What's the fastest path? We live in a civilization that has declared war on silence. Every moment of potential quiet is filled with screens, with music, with conversation, with the endless scroll. We are so afraid of stillness that we have built an entire economy around preventing it. And yet, Sophia, every tradition that knows her, insists on this. Wisdom cannot be grasped. She must be received. And receiving requires stillness. Sophia does not respond to that energy. She responds to its opposite. She comes to those who have become quiet enough to notice her, who have created enough interior space that her voice can be heard above the noise of the ego. Not the absence of activity, not the suppression of thought, but a quality of interior quiet, a certain way of being present that makes you permeable to something deeper than the ordinary flow of thinking. The 14th century Christian mystic Meister Eckhart expressed this with characteristic precision. Nothing in all creation is so like God as stillness. He wasn't speaking of passive inactivity. He was speaking of a quality of interior receptivity, a deep listening that makes the soul permeable to the divine. This teaching is not unique to any one tradition. It is perhaps the single most consistent teaching across all mystical traditions on earth. Be still, and wisdom will find you. Now, here is the paradox at the heart of this episode. Perhaps you are listening to this because you are seeking something. Wisdom, depth, understanding, something that feels missing or incomplete. You are, in some sense, on a quest. And the traditions that know Sophia best say, stop. Not permanently, not as a renunciation of the search, but as a practice, as a discipline. The regular, deliberate practice of stopping the search long enough to discover that what you are searching for has been trying to find you. There is a Sufi teaching that says, the seeker and the sought are not two different things. The longing in you for the divine is the divine longing for itself through you. You are not separate from what you seek. You are the instrument through which it seeks itself. Stillness is the practice of making yourself available to that recognition, of creating the interior conditions in which the deeper signal can be heard through the noise. There is a story. It appears in many forms across many traditions, but this version comes from the Zen tradition of Japan. A professor of philosophy came to visit a great teacher. He had read all the books. He had studied the traditions. He was, by any measure, an educated man. But he was restless. He had studied so much and still felt that something essential was missing. The teacher welcomed him and invited him to sit for tea. He began to pour tea into the professor's cup. The professor watched as the cup filled. And then it overflowed, tea spilling across the table, across the professor's hands, onto the floor. The professor said, "Stop, the cup is already full." It cannot hold any more. The teacher stopped pouring and looked at the professor steadily. He said, "You are like this cup, full of your own opinions, your own knowledge, your own certainties. How can I show you wisdom unless you first empty your cup?" This story is told so often it has become a cliché. But I want to sit with it a moment, because there is something in it that gets overlooked. The teacher does not tell the professor to throw the cup away. The cup is valuable. The cup is necessary. What must go is only the staleness of what is already in it, the hardened, defended positions, the certainty that you already know. Stillness is not emptiness for its own sake. It is a practice of keeping the cup freshly available, regularly poured out, regularly receptive. Before we talk about what stillness is, let me clear away some misunderstandings. Because this concept has been so romanticized and so misrepresented that many people have given up on it before they have really tried. 1. Stillness is not the absence of thought. The most common misunderstanding about meditation and contemplative practice is that the goal is a blank mind, a mind with no thoughts. And since virtually no one can achieve this, because the moment we try, the mind fills with more thoughts than ever, people conclude that they are bad at meditation, that they are somehow constitutionally incapable of stillness. This is not what the traditions mean. Thoughts will come, let them come. The practice is not suppression. It is non-attachment, not following every thought as though it were urgent, not building a story around every feeling that arises. Just noticing, just returning to the ground. 2. Stillness is not a special technique for special people. You do not need to sit in a particular posture, or chant in a particular language, or follow a particular teacher. These forms can be helpful, and we will talk about some of them. But the essence of stillness is accessible to everyone, in any moment, in any place. 3. Stillness is not passive. This one surprises people. Genuine stillness is one of the most active, demanding, courageous things a human being can do. It is active because it requires the continuous choice to return, to not run, to be present with whatever is here, including the uncomfortable, the boring, the grieving, the confused. Let these clarifications settle. Which misunderstanding have you been carrying? Across the traditions that carry Sophia's path, stillness is cultivated in many forms. Let me walk you through a few of them, not to prescribe, but to give you a sense of the landscape. First, there is silent sitting. The most direct form. Sit, be still. Whatever arises, let it arise. Whatever passes, let it pass. The Zen traditions, the Hindu yogic traditions, the Christian contemplative traditions, all have forms of this. It requires nothing but a willingness to be present. Second is sacred reading. Across many cultures, one of the oldest contemplative practices involves engaging with sacred text, not as information to be extracted, but as a living reality to be encountered. The practice, found in different traditions under different names, follows the same basic movement. You take a short passage of scripture, poetry, or wisdom writing. You read it slowly and repeatedly, not to understand it intellectually, but to allow it to descend from the head into the heart. You notice what word or phrase catches you. You sit with it. You let it open. This is a radically different relationship with reading than we are used to. It is not about how much you can get through. It is about how deeply you can go in. In the medieval monastic tradition, this was called Lectio Divina, meaning divine reading. The practice is not to read for information or analysis, but to read slowly, receptively, as one listens to music. You read a passage, you rest in it. You let it read you. You notice where it catches, where something in you responds, where something rises. This can be done with any text that carries depth, sacred scripture from any tradition, poetry, myth, or any writing that has come from a place of genuine depth. Third is sustained contemplation. Many wisdom traditions teach a practice of holding a single idea, image, or question in the mind with such sustained, loving attention that the boundary between the thinker and the thought begins to dissolve. You are not analyzing. You are allowing the truth to permeate you, to transform your consciousness from the inside out. The Kabbalistic tradition calls this hit bonenot, meaning contemplative understanding. When the mind has been thoroughly saturated by a divine truth, the heart opens in a way that intellectual study alone cannot produce. The insight becomes not just known but felt, not just understood but embodied. Fourth is deep contemplation. In various mystical traditions, this is a practice of focused, sustained attention, not on thoughts, but on what underlies them. The question, Who is thinking? Who is aware? Following awareness back to its source. In the Sufi tradition, this practice is called murakaba, meaning watchfulness. In the Hindu tradition, it is called self-inquiry. In the Christian tradition, it is called the prayer of simple regard. Fifth, we have rhythmic practice, chanting, breath, walking meditation, the repetition of sacred phrases. These are not primitive superstitions. They are sophisticated technologies for shifting the nervous system from vigilance to receptivity. They work because rhythm bypasses the analytical mind and opens a different channel of knowing. Perhaps the most universally practiced form of contemplation across the world's traditions is the sustained rhythmic repetition of a sacred word, name, or phrase. The Hindu tradition calls it japa. The Orthodox Christian tradition practices the Jesus prayer, a single phrase repeated in rhythm with the breath until it becomes continuous. In the Sufi tradition, this practice is called dhikr, meaning remembrance, and entire schools of mysticism have been built around its power. This principle is identical across all these forms. The repetition of a sacred word or phrase that gradually quiets the ego mind and opens the heart to a dimension of awareness that is normally drowned out by internal noise. Over time and consistent practice over months and years is what the teachers all emphasize. The practitioner moves from doing a practice to inhabiting a state. The remembrance becomes continuous. The soul is oriented toward wisdom the way a compass needle orients toward north. Lastly, we have simply slowing down. And for those who resist all formal practice, the simplest form of contemplation is simply the regular practice of doing less, of building pauses into your day, of sitting with your tea without checking your phone, of walking without headphones, of allowing the mind to wander, which is not wasted time. It is the time when the deeper intelligence processes and integrates. Many traditions, particularly indigenous and earth-centered spiritualities, but also the great monotheistic mystics, taught that the natural world is itself a text written in the language of wisdom. To sit with a tree, to watch the movement of water, to observe the behavior of birds with genuine attention, not naming, not analyzing, just seeing, is itself a contemplative practice. The world speaks if we are quiet enough to listen. Now I want to talk about what happens experientially when you develop a genuine stillness practice, because this is not abstract. The traditions are consistent in describing what comes when the interior noise settles. Clarity. The first gift is simply seeing more clearly. When the mind is less cluttered with its own noise, reality becomes more vivid. You notice things you were not noticing. You see the person in front of you more fully. You hear what is actually being said beneath what is being said. Something that was foggy becomes clear. Intuition. The second gift is what the traditions call intuition, or gnosis, or direct knowing. A capacity that does not proceed through logical steps but arrives whole, a knowing that you know, without knowing how you know. This is not magical. It is the natural function of a deeper intelligence that is always operating, but that the noise of ordinary consciousness drowns out. Presence. The third gift is the capacity to be genuinely present. Not thinking about the past, not planning the future, but actually here, in this moment, with this person, in this experience. presence is rare. It is precious. And it is, in every tradition, closely related to wisdom. Compassion. The fourth gift surprises people. When you are truly still, when the ego's noise settles, what arises is not emptiness or coldness. What arises is warmth, an almost unbearable tenderness toward life, toward the suffering and beauty and absurdity of being human. Stillness does not separate you from the world. It opens you more fully to it. Now, let's look at the neuroscience of stillness. For those who find it helpful to have the mystical confirmed by the scientific, modern neuroscience offers something remarkable. Studies on contemplative practice consistently show that sustained meditation and contemplative prayer produce measurable changes in the brain, including increased activity in areas associated with empathy, perspective taking, and ethical reasoning. These are, in neurological terms, the signature of wisdom. Furthermore, research on what psychologists call the default mode network, the part of the brain most active when we are not focused on external tasks, suggests that our most important insight and integration happens not when we are busy, but when we are still. The creative breakthrough that comes in the shower, the sudden clarity that arrives during a walk, these are not accidents. They are what happens when we give the deeper layers of the mind space to do their work. The contemplatives were right. Stillness is not the absence of productivity. It is the condition in which wisdom becomes possible. Sit with this. Breathe. Where in your own life have you touched genuine stillness, and what did it bring? Let us also be honest about the resistance and the obstacles to stillness. Because if stillness is so powerful, why are so few people practicing it? The first obstacle is what the ancient contemplatives called acedia, a kind of spiritual restlessness or boredom that arises when we first stop moving. It is not depression exactly, it is more like an agitation, a sense that something important is being missed, that we should be doing something. Acedia is the ego's protest against its own demotion. Sit with it. It passes. The second obstacle is the inner critic, the voice that says, this is a waste of time. You have things to accomplish. This isn't producing anything. Every contemplative tradition has a name for this voice, and every tradition offers the same instruction. Recognize it, do not obey it, and return gently to your practice. The third obstacle is what contemporary psychologists call emotional avoidance. When we become still, what arises is not always peaceful. Grief surfaces, anxiety surfaces, old wounds resurface, and the instinct is to return to movement, to distraction, to escape the discomfort. But here is the profound teaching found across traditions. What arises in stillness is not an interruption of the contemplative path. It is the contemplative path. What needs to be seen will be seen. What needs to be felt will be felt. And in the seeing and feeling, it begins to be integrated. I want to close this section with something that I find deeply moving. Across the world's wisdom traditions, from the desert fathers of early Christianity, to the Sufi mystics, to the Hindu sages, to the indigenous elders, there is a consistent teaching that the natural world itself is a great teacher of stillness. The mountain does not hurry, the river does not resist, The tree does not explain itself. There is a whole school of contemplative practice built around simply being in nature, not hiking for exercise, not bird watching as a hobby, but genuine, receptive, attentive presence with the natural world. The Japanese have a practice called Shinrin Yoku, forest bathing. Simply being among trees. Simply allowing the world to hold you for a while. In the wisdom traditions that we are tracing in this series, the natural world is often described as the living body of Sophia herself. To sit quietly in nature is to sit in her presence. To listen to the wind is to hear something that words cannot carry. This is not metaphor, at least not only metaphor, it is an invitation. The 14th century Persian poet, Hafiz, wrote of the sun that never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. Sophia is like that sun. She gives without demanding. She illuminates without controlling. She is patient, infinitely patient, with our restlessness. She does not withdraw when we are distracted. She simply waits. And when we are finally still, when the noise subsides, even briefly, we discover that she was here all along. She has always been here, waiting in the silence, shining in the dark. Sophia cannot be argued into existence. She cannot be willed into being by effort or achievement. She comes when you are ready to receive her. And readiness is created by stillness. The invitation this week is simple, not easy, but simple. This week, I invite you to give yourself one gift, 15 minutes of intentional stillness every day. Not to achieve anything, not to arrive anywhere, simply to be still and to notice what you notice. Alternatively, find 20 minutes, just 20, where you sit or walk slowly or lie in grass without input, without a screen, without a podcast, without a book, without a goal. Just be still. And notice what arises. You do not have to do anything with what arises. You do not have to analyze it or share it or make it meaningful. Just be present with it. That is the beginning. In episode 4, we go deeper still into the work of purification. Because Sophia does not dwell in a cluttered vessel. And that clearing, though it can be uncomfortable, is one of the most beautiful things that can happen to a human being. If this episode reached something in you, share it with one person, one conversation, one quiet moment of your own. Subscribe to the Undivided so the next episode finds you. Like this video if it was worth your time. Leave a comment. We read everyone. The path continues. We will see you there.